veganism led to profound nutritional deficiencies because
Okay.
at the end of the day, you were not able to absorb micronutrients. And what I'm
Right.
referring to there are vitamins and minerals and fat soluble molecules. We can't absorb those the same way from plant foods that we can from animal foods. The example that I give to my patients is if you think about eating a spinach salad, there's a lot of work that goes into breaking that down and turning it into something that your body can use. Enzymatic steps, energy costs that go into it.
Mhm.
But then you think about a cow and what it's doing all day is it's literally standing in a field eating salad all day, turning it something that a creature can use. So it's
Mhm.
much more efficient when you think about the
Yeah.
human standpoint of nutrient delivery.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and today my guest is Dr. Alexandra MacKillop. She is a functional medicine doctor who used to be a food scientist, which really excited to talk to you about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and to dive into some of this. I've got an interesting background, I think, in the field that I'm currently working and the experiences I had on the inside, so to speak. So,
Yeah.
um, looking
So,
forward to diving in here.
yeah, so how did you go from that's like such a huge leap? How did you go from working in like a food science lab to being a doctor?
Yeah, so we'd have to rewind a couple decades. When I was a child, I loved cooking, I loved science, I was good at those things. And when you're in science classes in high school, and your teachers always ask you, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" I didn't really know. I
Yeah.
just said, "Oh, I'll be an engineer," right? And so I got to engineering school. I went to Purdue, and I learned that the day job of an engineer means you're sitting at a computer all day doing coding. So that
Hmm.
was not a great, step for me. I don't love sitting around.
Yeah.
I definitely don't love coding. And so I
Hmm.
had to find a different thing to major in. I didn't know that food science was an industry at all. I mean, I guess I hadn't really thought critically about it. And then I learned about it because food science is a big program at Purdue. They're a big agriculture university. They have a big engineering program, and food science is essentially engineering meets agriculture. So the good news for me is when I transferred, all my engineering credits transferred because I was just sort of getting more specialized. And it was really fun for me. I loved the
Hmm.
physics, I loved the chemistry. I was good at those things, and I also loved cooking. And
Hmm.
what's more fun than having your chemistry lab being something related to food? We
Right.
made
Yeah.
boba in one of my chemistry labs, those little boba
Yeah.
capsules. And
Fun.
how fun is that, right?
Yeah.
It was never a drag to be studying. And there was a lot of emphasis on these sorts of same conversations that we're having now
Hmm.
regarding the safety of these chemicals and these additives. And the perspective in my training in college very much focused on, these things are necessary. Human disease is a risk. Bacteria in food is a risk. The other things that we're adding as fun ingredients, like
Hmm.
flavors, for example, and dyes, they're not as bad as everyone says. The dose determines the poison,
Hmm.
all those things that everybody's talking about. And I even had professors who would say, even water is toxic at high doses. And then everybody would laugh about just how stupid the consumers were for thinking these things, right?
Yeah.
So then I graduate and I'm working in the flavor industry, which was really exciting for me because what's more fun than working on salad dressing,
Yeah. Right.
or potato chip safety, and
Yeah.
is flavors and coming up with new stuff. It's like the dream of every food science and engineering student to land a job in R&D, right?
Yeah.
Where you're inventing new
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
Um, so I was working in the flavor industry. I was on a team with a chief flavorist or senior
Mhm.
flavorist, who's kind of leads up the projects, and I was her lab rat, and I did what she told me to do. Right?
Yeah.
I go get the chemical that's on the recipe, and my job was called flavor compounding. So I would take the flavor ingredients, and mix them together. A little of this, a little of that. Now you have something that tastes like green apple, right? And
Right.
it was
Mhm.
really neat and really exciting. I will say it is one of the coolest things I've had the experience of doing from a
Yeah.
chemistry perspective. But at the same time, going through college and some of my other parallel interests, my interest in cooking, my interest in science, I was also interested in health, human health, and nutrition, and taking care of my body. And one of my interests in food science was, hey, can we emphasize a vegan alternative to these normal food products? I was a
Right.
vegan at the time. I
Mhm.
thought veganism was going to save the world.
Of
And I was
course.
like, as a hobby in my apartment kitchen in college, I'm like trying to invent my own fake chicken, right?
Right.
I even entered a competition for a fake sausage product. The things that we wish we could change about our past, right?
We all have them.
And I'm thinking about my interest in health, and I'm learning about my own health and some health issues that I was dealing with, which, surprise, surprise, developed as a consequence of being a vegan. And then I'm also working with these products in a chemistry lab, essentially, and I'm looking at the ingredients and how they have these warning labels on them. They say poison, do not ingest, right? Open in a well-ventilated area, neurotoxin, may cause harm to the unborn child. And I'm reading these things and I start to have this cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah.
This is fun. This is exciting. And this is potentially really damaging to myself and to the consumer. And how do I feel about the fact that I'm playing a role in delivering toxins into food for people to consume? And around that time, I was also a little bit disenchanted with the lab lifestyle, where you go sit in a room with bright fluorescent lights and you pipette little droplets of ingredients. And that, I was kind of losing interest in the day-to-day of it. The big picture's fun. I'm making a lime flavoring, but that's a 40-hour work week of like sitting here with little droppers, right? And I, at the same time, was getting more interested in health and wellness and how do I translate this to other people? How do I talk about this? So I had a blog and I was writing about health and wellness. And then I was like, I want to do this, right? So how do I do this? Okay, well, I'll go to school for it. I'll switch gears here. Honestly, I was very fortunate in the sense that the college I went on a scholarship and I had access to a full tuition scholarship for not just my bachelor's, but also a master's degree and a medical degree. And so I'm applying to medical school. I applied to one medical school, which was Indiana University, because that is the school I could go to on my scholarship. And I've got this passion, right? I'm like, I'm going to save the world with nutrition. I'm going to work with patients. And I get to my interview and there's this gentleman who's my interviewer. And he says, what specialty do you want to go into? And I explained that I was interested in primary care because I'm going to help people and I'm going to be a hero and all these different things. And he goes, okay, how long do you think that's going to take? And I said, I don't understand what you're asking me. Right. And he goes, you get 17 minutes and 36 seconds with a patient. If you take any longer than that, you're going to be meeting with your hospital administrator and you're going to lose your job.
Crazy.
He said, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. You're not getting into my medical school. And even though I had a full tuition scholarship, and this was, to be totally honest and full disclosure, it was an academic merit scholarship. So I was a good student, right?
Right.
I didn't get in because I flunked my interview.
Because you wanted to be a better doctor.
Exactly. I wanted to change the system. And I really still do believe in that. And I was crushed, obviously, you're 20 something and bright eyed and bushy tailed and you think you're going to do whatever you think you're going to do. And I had, that early life crisis moment. So next round of applications, I was like, well, I'll apply to multiple medical schools this time instead of putting all my eggs in one basket. Then I was looking at the price tag and I thought to myself, if that guy was right and I don't get to do what I actually want to do, am I going to spend upwards of $300,000 for a profession that maybe I don't want to be in? And I'm already in a profession I don't want to be in.
Right.
Even though I like it conceivably, right? Cue another life crisis.
Yeah.
Right. If I don't want to pay for it, why would I do it anyway if I got into a school that was paid for? And then I learned that there are alternative routes to working in functional medicine, which is what I do now. It's root cause focused, it's nutrition focused. It's not at odds with Western medicine. It's preventing the need for Western medicine as best we can. And that route for me was through chiropractic medicine.
Okay.
So as a chiropractor in the state that I'm licensed in, we have the full scope as primary care physicians. But I don't work at a hospital. I have nobody breathing down my neck and timing my patient appointments, which are much longer than 17 minutes. So in this setting, I get to do what I love to do, which is burn the system to the ground, essentially, metaphorically speaking.
So I think that's amazing. And I love that you did. I love the different paths that you took to get to where you are, because I think for so many people, they start going to college and only something like 70% of people even actually do what they went to college for. So many people start And then they finish and they just like, they don't want to do that. So they end up with jobs that are subpar, a lot of times because they're not, in the profession that they want to be in. And it gets complicated and confusing. And then people feel like, they're losers and they feel like they failed because they're not doing what they have to say. And then they have all these student loans. And I know the
Yeah.
whole thing is just crazy and exhausting and expensive. So I love how you bounced into different things until you found the one that you love. I applaud you for that. I just think that's amazing.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to the food science thing for a few minutes before we touch more on kind of, some functional medicine stuff. There's all this stuff going on right now. Have you seen the Food Babes petition for
Yeah.
Kellogg's and all of that? And so I think the tides are turning. I pray that the tides are turning, for my children's sake, for your children's sake, for my grandchildren's sake, that are coming soon. And I just think we need to do something about that. So I wanted to talk about those things for a little while. So to kind of open up people's eyes to it, because people sit down with a bowl of Fruit Loops, give their kids a bowl of Fruit Loops for breakfast before they send them off to school. They don't think about what's in it. Stop at the bank after school, not, and then there's the whole thing with what the kids eat at school, which we don't even have time to get into that. But you stop at the bank afterwards, and the bank people give them a lollipop. You go to the dentist and they give them, a lollipop or a little bag of candy for being good patients, like it's everywhere we go. It's everywhere we look. Nothing. There are people who don't eat any real food in an entire day, and even an entire week, they don't eat real food. And so the food science part of it is the majority of what they're eating is food science. It's not even, they're food-like products. They're not even foods. So back to when you said a few minutes ago, you said something about you were getting the chemicals for the recipes. And like that really stands out to me because food shouldn't have chemicals in it. If you're eating food that has chemicals in it and has lots of preservatives in it, you're eating the wrong foods. And so for me, that's just crazy to even think you weren't working on a science experiment. You didn't need ingredients for that. You needed the chemicals for the food recipes. And that's insane to me. So I want to talk about the safety measures that they took in this lab. So you're reading all of these labels that say poison, do not ingest. And meanwhile, you're putting it in little droppers and you're putting it into the food for samples and for people to eat. What was that like? What was that light bulb moment for you? Like where you're standing there like, wait a minute, how did that happen?
Yeah. So the light bulb moment for me was actually some of the behaviors of the senior flavorist that I was working under.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of the job was I'm the lab rat. I go make the samples, and she's building a flavor, right? I remember a specific example where somebody wanted a flavor that tasted just like McDonald's vanilla ice cream. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
the way that they do that is they take the actual food and they put it in a machine that sees what volatile chemicals come off of
Okay.
it. Well, if you take all those volatile chemicals and the proportions that they come from, it's not quite there, right?
Okay.
You have to round it out somewhere. And that's where her experience came from. Is she'd been doing this for so long. She knew, okay, I need to add a little bit extra of octanol or cis-3-hexenol or furfural in order to round this out, which is really an amazing skill if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it. It's
Sure.
like a sommelier to a next level, right? And when she would sample something, she didn't swallow it. She spit it into this bucket. And she had drawn on this bucket a skull and crossbones. And I asked her, I was like, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, you don't want to be drinking this all day. And I said, why? And she goes, well, these are toxic. And I was like, wait a minute.
Wait.
But
Wait.
isn't it diluted? Doesn't the dose determine the poison? And, I wrote it off to myself. Well, she's sitting here literally all day tasting this stuff, right? Well, then what am I doing as I'm also tasting it? Because that was part of my job. I got to
Right.
partake of this. Like
Yeah.
here's vanilla ice cream flavor as it goes by iteration by iteration by iteration. And then the whole company would come in for the final taste test, like which
Mm-hmm.
one, and we vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't thinking about myself, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
my my own health risk.
Yeah.
Another example that I had, my sister was pregnant at the time, and I had a little bit of a lab accident. I spilled one of these chemicals on my shoe,
Uh-huh.
and it was butyric acid, which smells really fascinatingly terrible. It's one of the flavor components that makes vomit smell so bad. It's like a fatty
Wow.
acid
Mm-hmm.
breakdown product, essentially.
Yeah.
In some capacity, butyric acid can be beneficial to gut bacteria, from a health standpoint, but it's
Mhm.
only when it's in the right spot in your body, right?
Right. Yeah.
And this drum had all these warning labels on it, and this was a very potent smell coming from my shoe. I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I should go visit her with these shoes on. Like, I think I need to go home and change my clothes before I see my
Mhm.
pregnant sister, right? Because these labels and these warnings
Yeah.
and some of these different things. And that was another light bulb moment for me. Like, because of my job, I can't visit somebody um, in the warehouse, right, where they would manufacture these giant drums of flavor product before shipping it out to their customers. The that worked in the warehouse had to wear these full masks that looked like almost a hazmat suit. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking to myself, haha, they look like aliens, they look like astronauts. Like, and then I put together like, oh,
They're
wait,
protecting
because they
themselves.
can't exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
And, when I had to fill in for one of them one time, the new kid on the block, it was my job to take over, and
Yeah.
I had to wear this mask, and I'm like, "I can't even." First of all, I feel like I can't even breathe, and
Yeah.
what would happen if I took it off? But, it scares you when you see all
Yeah.
these labels and the
Mhm.
warnings and different acids and things like that. So, those are some of those areas that really brought to my attention, this isn't food, this isn't safe, this isn't even something that I really feel ethically about from, like, a worker
Mhm.
standpoint. Like, we're endangering ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did it change the way you were eating? Did you like realize and stop eating those kinds of things?
Yeah, yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic to think about that, right?
Mhm.
Because at the time I was not necessarily quick to limit my diet just following that information. There's a
Mhm.
whole way of unlearning and rethinking and relearning
Yes.
that goes into viewing the food process as a whole. I generally view myself as more of a whole food eater, and I had been that way for a long time anyways. I wasn't very forward on some of the manufactured food products. But actually, once I met my husband and we started gardening and homesteading and things like that, and looking at food in the sense of like, I grew every single piece of this meal
Mhm.
versus like, there are so many things on the product that or excuse me, so many products on the market that I literally could not make in my home kitchen because
Mhm.
not only do I not have access to the chemicals, I
Mhm.
don't have access to the equipment, I don't have access to some of the really extremes that are involved in producing these things. Like you talk about Fruit Loops or goldfish crackers, for example. Those are what we call an extruded food product, right? There's a difference between oats and a Cheerio. And the
Right.
difference is Cheerios have been processed at such a high heat and high pressure environment. They get cranked through these screw mechanisms, and then when they come out the end, there's so much pressure that they puff up and they pop, and then
Uh-huh.
they bake it, so now it's a baked cereal right now.
Mhm.
And you can't make that at home. First of all, the equipment is, like, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the chemical changes that go that those food particles undergo, I mean, you look at the glycemic index between a whole grain actual oat and Cheerios that are whole grain, and it's night and day difference
Yeah.
looking at some of those things because of how they've been processed.
Mhm.
Um, from the standpoint of differentiating food from not food, when you
Mhm.
think about things on the market, it also comes down to looking at how our food system is built and the governmental
Mhm.
regulations and
Mhm.
some of the different subsidies and things, right? In the food industry, if you come up with a new food product, they actually had a simulation of this at our capstone design project where we came up with a food product. You go through all the costs and sourcing and everything that goes into a manufactured food product. We turned them all in. Our professor immediately handed them all back to us and said, cut the cost by 30%.
Mhm.
And that's what happens in the food industry, which is what he was
Right.
trying to illustrate to us.
Mhm.
And cost cutting in the food industry, it's not a matter of here's this great new food, let's bring it to market. It's a matter of here are the ingredients that are subsidized by the US government, turn them into something that the consumer will accept.
Yeah.
And that's what we market as food. And
Mhm.
that's eye-opening to think about it that way. Foods
Yeah.
that humans have been consuming for eons, right?
Mhm.
The natural foods that grow in the
Mhm.
ground
Mhm.
versus things that humans can't even make,
Yeah.
without absurd technologies.
Yeah. I'm always saying to people, like, on this channel and like on Instagram, when I'm talking to people, I'm always saying, like, There is a huge difference between buying good quality ingredients and making chocolate chip cookies at your house versus buying a tube of Pillsbury chocolate chip cookie dough. There is a huge difference in that as far as how your body deals with it. And like there's just a huge difference in those two things. And people don't think that. People think, well, what's the difference? It's got flour, it's got sugar, sure, it's got some preservatives in it, but so what? That's just so it doesn't go bad sitting on the shelf. People don't take into account the processes that every one of those ingredients went through, plus the preservatives. And just buying those 5 or 6 ingredients and making chocolate chip cookies, you can have a few chocolate chip cookies like that and not have them be junk food, basically. I mean, sure, they still have all the ingredients and they still have the carbs and the fat, that are in them. So they're still, the macros are still there and there is still sugar in it, but that doesn't necessarily make it entirely a junk food. So if you're out there and you're not like a low carb person, or your kids aren't, and you want them to have a treat like that, make it yourself instead of buying the tube of Pillsbury cookie dough just because it's easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And from a nutritional standpoint too, there's value in grass-fed butter, vitamins A and E, things like
Mm-hmm.
that are not in the vegetable shortening that's been manufactured from hydrogenated corn oil that was extracted from these feedlots,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It's an entirely different food product, even though they both look like a
Mm-hmm.
chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said that you had been vegan, and you stopped being a vegan because of health issues. So what happened?
Yeah, so I was dealing with some thyroid problems. The veganism led to profound nutritional deficiencies because
Okay.
at the end of the day, you were not able to absorb micronutrients. And what I'm
Right.
referring to there are vitamins and minerals and fat soluble molecules. We can't absorb those the same way from plant foods that we can from animal foods. You
Right.
know, the example that I give to my patients is if you think about eating a spinach salad, there's a lot of work that goes into breaking that down and turning it into something that your body can use. Enzymatic steps, energy costs that go into it. But then you think about a cow and what it's doing all day is it's literally standing in a field eating salad all day, turning it into
Right.
something that a
Mm-hmm.
creature can use. So it's
Mm-hmm.
much more efficient when you think about the
Yeah.
human standpoint of nutrient delivery. So I was nutrient deficient really across the board, and I was following a low calorie vegan diet. So I wasn't getting enough macronutrients either, and it was affecting my thyroid. My thyroid was not creating the hormones that it was supposed to. So I was having dry skin, I was cold all the time, my hair was falling out, I was tired, my periods were affected, all those different things that develop from hypothyroidism.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Yeah.
was coming largely from my diet, compounded by stress in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I realized, first of all, in order to shift this, I have to unlearn what I had been taught my whole life, that fat's bad for you,
Mm-hmm.
eating beef gives you heart disease, and I started to cross examine once I was healthier. And as I went through some of my training thereafter, like, wow, there's a big disconnect here. Like, actually, the things that most nutritional professionals and the government
Mm-hmm.
tells us are making us sick.
Yeah, absolutely. They're making us sick. And I don't know if you saw the newest dietary guidelines from the 2025 U.S. Dietary Guideline Committee. Did you see that, where they have lowered protein and increased legumes and whole grains? I think so. Sure, that'll fix everything and make everybody healthier. Let's give them more of the thing that's already making them sick.
We can just say that humans need less protein,
Right.
and
Let's
therefore
just say they need less. Yeah.
we've
So
spoken it into existence.
yeah, that's right. And so I want to be clear, you are not a carnivore. We are on my carnivore channel because when I found your page, I wanted to talk about the food science and stuff, and also the fact that you're a functional medicine doctor. And I really try to focus a lot on health on this channel too, not just carnivore stuff. And so we talked about that a little bit off camera, about a lower carb diet and a keto diet. So what kind of diet do you recommend for your patients?
Yeah, I typically will point people towards more of a paleo ancestral diet,
Okay.
limiting grains, which
Mm-hmm.
inherently means limiting processed foods and ultra processed foods. With every patient, I'm talking about focusing a little bit more on an animal forward perspective, though. I myself eat very animal focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
I eat vegetables, I eat grains, but my breakfast this morning was or egg yolks. Why the yolks, not the whites? Well, because my children only eat the whites, and so I get what's left over,
Yeah.
right? But I've just found that as I get older, I can't handle carbohydrates in the morning. My blood sugar drops, my stress drops, I get impatient and irritable, and like I see my primary job as being patient and loving to my children, and I can't do that if my blood sugar's all over the
That's
place.
right.
And we just have so much data about the utility and the value of foods that come from healthy animals, right? That's a key part of it. I think, if humans aren't supposed to eat corn, well, don't eat an animal that spent its life eating corn.
Right.
That's going to be very different metabolically, right? So that's what I encourage my patients to do. And whether they're dealing with a hormone issue or a blood sugar issue, I mean, we just see incredible results there. I've had one patient who was eating a whole food diet, but he couldn't get his fasting blood sugars under control. And he was very much living in the 90s when saturated fat is bad. And
Yeah.
I convinced him through by way of his wife, actually, to eat more red meat, butter, whole milk yogurt instead of the fat-free yogurt. That change alone brought his cholesterol down, normalized his A1C. And this was a healthy, like relatively lean, active guy. Like he's constantly working out. Adding the animal products back in fixed his metabolic issue, right? Or one gal in particular, vegan, acne that could not get controlled. It wasn't even controlled when she was using all the different pharmaceuticals that people were throwing at her. We reintroduced animal protein, and that cleared up her acne because it changes so much of your metabolism. It changes your nutrient absorption and utilization. Acne, as an example, it's an inflammatory condition of your skin because of bacteria that are taking advantage of blood sugar that is available because of the hormonal environment. So it's this complex issue that is really in your face, literally,
Yeah.
right? Hard to avoid. And there's so many steps involved. But when you think about your hormones and how blood sugar control and your adrenal response, micronutrient availability influences those things, not to mention the blood sugar itself, how it shifts your microbiome. If you're eating garbage, your microbiome is going to be garbage.
Right.
And then your immune system's response to that, if it doesn't have the building blocks it needs, then you've really got a skin problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you said it's in your face, literally, I wanted to say, and on your back too, because so many people that have those issues, and people don't, like I say to people all the time, that starts in your gut, right? People really don't know that, and doctors aren't telling them that. They're just writing them a prescription for the medication.
Sometimes with acne, it's an antibiotic medication. It's like, where do you think your bacteria is coming from to begin with?
Yeah.
Your food,
and that's
actually.
And that's obviously just going to make it even worse. And they don't tell them to take probiotics afterwards either. Like if you're taking an antibiotic, you should always follow it up with probiotics, and they're not telling them to do that either. So they're just destroying their gut even worse.
I was just going to explain, a lot of times with my patients, we run stool testing in our office. And so we actually profile their microbiome. And there's a major class of bacteria that's a soil-based organism called Enterococcus. And people are just profoundly deficient in this across the board. I see it all the time. And I often people will ask me, why am I so deficient in this? Is this because I took antibiotics ever? And the answer is yes and no. I mean, yes, if you wipe out your gut. That being said, your diet should repopulate these things. But when you look at our modern food system and the way that we grow things, in the fields, we spray them with pesticides and herbicides, and we have these nitrogen fertilizers. You better believe that if it kills a mouse or a ladybug, it kills bacteria. Then we harvest the apples like a bazillion months in advance. It's a technical time frame.
Absolutely.
We put them in these warehouses and we halt the ripening with these different gases. We spray them with chlorine because we don't want bacteria and yeast to grow on them, which, okay, fine, that gets the job done. But what does your bacteria do when it encounters chlorine gas, which is bleach, right?
Right.
And then we put them in grocery stores where a lot of times those sprayers that come down on the fresh produce, that has chlorinated water in it. We bring it home and we cook it, which cooking is a sterilization technique. Not that it's bad, but it is a sterilization technique. So every point along the line of going from farm to your table, it's been sterilized. No wonder you don't have anything growing in your gut that's supposed to be there.
Yeah. And the cure for that is eating local. Whenever humanly possible, you should be eating local. And I know that's hard. Like for me right now, and we're in Virginia, it's cold. It's getting cold here. You can't really grow anything this time of year here. So ancestrally, I wouldn't be eating those things at this time of year here. So what do I have that's growing here? You might be able to get kale here up until, like December, but that has oxalates in it. And so, then you have to make that decision. But There aren't any greenhouses here, and even that wouldn't make it ancestral appropriate to eat those things right now. The only thing that I could actually eat, 1,000 years ago, where I live right now, would have been the animal products. Those are the only things that would have lasted all year in an area like this where it gets cold in the wintertime. And people completely discount that and act like that doesn't matter at all. And then they just go to the store and they buy more processed foods anyway.
Yeah.
It's really sad. So, as a mom with small kids, how do you handle this knowledge that you have of health in particular, but also the food science stuff? How do you handle that as a parent where everybody's trying to hand them a lollipop? But we have people that walk around at our church with bags of blow pops and hand them out to the kids who have just eaten a donut and had a Dr. Pepper for breakfast. It's ridiculous how normal that is. And it's everywhere. So how do you handle that as a mom with small children?
Yeah, and it is challenging because of what you just brought up. It's just the social aspect,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I don't want my kids to feel like they're weird because
Right.
of decisions that mom makes, right?
Mhm.
And so at home, we eat the way that we eat. We
Mhm.
home cook our meals, we eat healthy, we talk about that. My kids eat protein and they are required to finish the protein on their plates. And
Mhm.
there's controversy about that, but that's something that I believe is really important
Me
because
too.
I'm laying a foundation for them in
Mhm.
every aspect of their lives, with their education, with my love for them, with their nutrition, with what I
Mhm.
ask of them, how I teach them to be functional humans, right?
Right.
And that's something that I feel convicted about. So we eat the way we eat at home and we talk about, we don't want to go eat a treat if you don't have protein in your belly and you don't have fiber in your belly. And
Mhm.
so if we go out and same thing at our church, like there's the sweet couple that sits behind the tech booth, they always have donuts for the kids. And oh, my son was hardly old enough to walk and he knew where to go for the donuts, right?
Mm.
And we just make sure that before we go to church, we have a protein focused, micronutrient dense breakfast because
Mhm.
we know what's coming, right? And
Yeah.
if we can distract away from some of those things, we do.
Yeah.
But I also want to equip my kids with the decisions to make that for themselves. I want them to leave my home and my
Mhm.
protection and not know how to navigate that. I mean, that's true of everything, right?
Mhm.
And parenting these days.
Yeah.
So I
And
see it as open conversation
mhm.
and equipping them as is developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, and it does work teaching them that when they're young. Now there is a point for me where they hit a certain age and they just eat whatever they want, for a while, but typically they've come back, to a healthier version of a diet. My family isn't carnivore, and my youngest two daughters are 16 and 18, and they're very conscious of what they eat. They're careful. If they have a volleyball game or a basketball game or they have practice, they say, well, I'm not going to eat that today. I'm going to save that, until tomorrow. So
Mhm.
at least it's there in their heads. And, I have to be a good example and teach them and hope that, once they're older adults and they, start realizing those things aren't good for them, they know what to do.
And recognizing how you feel too.
Yeah.
It's not
Hmm.
just rules that we have at home, but like, what's your
Yeah.
body telling you? And those
Yeah.
are words that my 3-year-old can even repeat to me. Like I've said to him before, honey, I can't talk to you right now because I need to eat something.
Yeah.
I'm feeling that. And he goes,
Yeah.
what's your body telling you, mama?
Oh,
Which is
cute.
very dear. I'm not sure it quite resonates with him as I hope
Yeah.
it would, but
Yeah.
you put that language and that equip them with
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah, it'll be there for when he does understand it better. And
exactly.
what about like products for your home, skincare products, makeup, cleaning products as a functional medicine doctor? Do you talk to people about those kinds of things too and talk to them about eliminating those toxins? Our toxic loads are so heavy.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in my practice, I focus a lot on hormones and endocrine disruptors being a
Hmm.
major risk in a lot of our personal care products. I mean, the
Hmm.
plastics that get into the manufactured food products,
Hmm.
the phthalates and the parabens that are in personal care products,
Right.
even down to what we're cleaning our houses with.
Mm.
So I actually spend an entire 30-minute visit with essentially every patient that comes through the door talking about these things because many people aren't aware, like you mentioned. And then from there, they don't necessarily have the tools, even if they are aware, like, okay, parabens are bad. So, like, where do I find a personal care product that doesn't have these things
Hmm.
in it, right? What do I
Right.
use as a moisturizer? And
Mm.
we can talk about some of the animal-based skincare products or different plant-based oils that aren't pumped with these other types of preservatives and
Hmm.
chemicals, fragrances. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
My tip that I give to everybody is, instead of buying the expensive natural household cleaner, just put vinegar in a spray bottle and wipe things down because it's $2 for a gallon,
Hmm.
or you can spend
Yeah.
$17 for 2
Hmm.
ounces of Dr.
Yeah.
Meyer's, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I have found that a steel wool pad goes a really long way as far as cleaning showers and bathtubs and things like that. You don't even have to use a vinegar. I used to use baking soda to avoid
Mhm.
using, a toxic cleaner. I would scrub and scrub and scrub. But now I have found, a friend of mine mentioned the steel wool to me, and I was like, so I do it dry, and everything like the
Mm.
hard water stains and stuff, they just fall off into a powder and you rinse them down the drain. It's really amazing.
Oh, wow.
Even after just a week of not cleaning, if you do that when it's dry, it's really amazing. So there's another little tip for you to tell your
Yeah,
patients.
that's
It
great.
makes a huge difference. It's so much easier. You can get in there, and I'm short. So for me, leaning over the bathtub, to get to the
Yeah.
opposite wall is super hard. So I don't have to worry about it. I can get in with my shoes on because it's dry, and I can just kind of scrub it, and everything comes out nice and clean with no toxins. So that's my little
Yeah,
tip of the
that's a
day.
great tip. Yeah. Elbow grease, the old-fashioned way, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, all those sprays don't even work very well.
No.
You spray them on, it makes it gooey and terrible for
But
you.
it smells like lang lang,
I
right?
know. That's right.
So it must be clean.
That's right. Or it smells like citrus because of the artificial citrus,
Yeah.
scents in it. People love that. People love that clean laundry scent, that fresh laundry scent. That's the number one cause of indoor air pollution. People have no idea.
And outdoor, I mean, our neighbors, I won't, I'm not gonna throw adjacent neighbors out under the bus, but we go
Yeah.
for a walk. It's like I know who's
Yes.
doing their laundry because it's several blocks down the street. It's
I
just
know. And you can smell it. You can smell it coming out of their vent, right? It's crazy the
Mhm.
way those products linger in the air. And that's not natural. And that is causing endocrine disruptions and can cause infertility and ADHD. Like you're putting your kids on medication for ADHD when all you would have to do maybe is stop giving them sugar and stop using like the artificially scented things like the plugins and the laundry detergent and stuff, right?
toxins to manage the toxins, manage the
To
toxins.
manage the toxins. That's right. Alexandra, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for spending the time with me.
Well, of course, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what
Super
you do.
fun. Super fun, super informative. Thank you so much. And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.